All right, you saw me throw it in the soup. Now we're going to talk about what the soup is. Basically what I've got here is a bucket that I bought down at Home Improvement Center that I put about $2 or $2. Boy, I wish it was $2. $85 worth of gasoline in here. It's about 2 gallons worth. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about that. That's what I did to soak the carburetor. There's all kinds of carburetor cleaning materials out there that you can put a carburetor in. Stuff that's probably going to work better than this. But what I'm finding at the parts stores right now is it's really hard to get the stuff. A lot of parts stores, at least in our area, are running low on a lot of items. And I think that's because they're not running as many trucks to save money. That's just my theory. But I have a hard time sometimes even finding just regular spray carburetor choke cleaner at the auto parts store. Not sure how that is in your area right now, but as of 2022 in November here in the United States, in North Augusta, South Carolina, that's how it is. Now I'm going to take this and cover that back up and kind of set it aside for a second to talk about some of the other things I'm using for parts cleanup. I bought these bore brushes. I don't know if that's what they're really called. These are just little brushes that you can get down at the Harbor Freight to go in and start cleaning around inside of a carburetor. I have a brass brush that I will use, but I'm going to tell you right now, this is going to leave marking on the carburetor body if you do it on the outside. So if you're doing any kind of cleanup, try to stay as far away from this as you possibly can, unless you've got a part that's just really rusty and it's a steel part, like the accelerator pump rod, things like that. This is okay for that, but not for other things. Any of the pot metal or aluminum parts on the carburetor, it won't work for. Acid brushes. I bought a bunch of these at Harbor Freight, and I'm going to tell you right now, acid brushes can be your best friend on this, but be warned that the acid brushes can start slipping hair. The hairs, or if those are, I don't know if that may not be hair anymore, but the little hairs of the brush will actually start to come out, and they can get inside of your carburetor and cause problems and wreak a little bit of havoc. And then finally, I have a plastic brush that I use. This brush is good for just cleaning up the general crust and crumb in there. I use a good bit of this when I'm cleaning them up. Initial cleanup, I'm almost always using this one, and then I'll start moving to some of these other types of brushes. The last thing I have is guitar string. Now you may have seen the little short that we ran on the guitar string, and basically what I use this stuff for, like this is a 58, and I don't know if we can pick it up on the cameras, but I'll use this to go in and clean out ports. I like these that are a wound, like this is a nickel wound wire. This is probably, I don't know, let's just say it's the low string. I don't know what they're called. I'm not a guitar player, nor do I play one on TV. But I use this for getting inside the ports on the carburetor, and it works really well for that activity, mostly because it won't bend over and kink readily. It will kink. You can kink a guitar string, but I'm just saying that on the whole, it's got really good flexibility for going in there and cleaning out ports, and sometimes on these, the ports really need to be done. I'm going to set that one over there so it can unfurl on the floor. And I've got all different sizes. I just went ahead and bought a pack at the Guitar Center the other day, 18, there's like 14, 11, so there's some really small sizes, and those are really good for getting into some of the places I'm going to show you in just a second. So that's the cleanup stuff. Now I'm going to pull all this off of here, take the lid off, and get really high while I'm dealing with gasoline. I don't know that this is going to work really well. I've never done it before, but this is just an option that I thought of when I was desperately looking around for a way to get something to clean up this carburetor for a rebuild. And oddly enough, it works pretty darn well. But the problem is, I'm having a worry that you might get a little high doing it inside an enclosed area. We're in the studio space today, so we're kind of in an enclosed area, and there's a lot of stink in the air from this. But it's really the only thing I can find that actually seems to work. Ethanol gases have the alcohol in them, which is some of what you're going to be using for cleaning up stuff anyway. And I should probably be wearing my safety glasses, and I'm not. So I'm going to stop here in a second and go get them. Sometimes I just can't resist keeping going when I should stop. Drop that back down in the fluids. Put the lid on it so I don't make the crew high. I'm gonna go get my safety glasses. I know, it's a set of readers, but it'll do what I need it to do because then I'll be able to see all the little stuff inside the carburetor. All right, I'm gonna go back in here and pull this back out again. I'm just gonna kind of clean around the outside. Again, on this carburetor, I am not that concerned with how pretty it is. I'm only really concerned with cleanliness inside of the carburetor, but that anal portion of me can't help myself. The reason I like to wear gloves when I'm doing this is because gasoline has a lot of additives in it, and I find that if I get gasoline all over my skin and my hands, my pores soak it up and I end up not feeling well for a couple of days after doing one of these. So I tend to not do that. A little worried that these nitrile gloves may not keep the gasoline away from my skin. These brushes like this are nice because they have a little tip brush on them, which will let you get tight into some of these corners, and a broad brush portion that lets you just clean up a whole swath of an area. I really especially want to get up in here. This was where the bug's entry point to its lair was. If you haven't seen that video yet, go back and watch it. We talk about tearing this thing apart. This is just the back side of the carburetor, nothing really going on back there. I'm going to take my brass brush. This is a steel part, so the brass brush is okay on it. It typically won't mark up the surface that badly. It just loosens up the material. And I can use my plastic brush to come back in and clean it off. I think I am pretty much done with that. I'm going to set it aside out here. All right, I'm going to pull the carburetor body out. This is where things are going to get a little bit more tricky. This does require a lot of time and just patience to deal with trying to get all this stuff loosened up. Carburetor choke cleaner can get down in here and do a lot of this too, but I find that you'll go through a lot of cans just trying to get all this cleaned up. It's better to go in here with something like what I'm doing right now. It'll make your life a little bit easier on that end financially because that stuff's pretty expensive now. Gasoline's expensive too, just not as expensive as a carburetor choke cleaner. Luckily on this one, our ports look pretty good. Now, a couple things going on inside of here. These two ports are vacuum ports. I'm not sure I can remember what that port is, but I think it is also one that comes in to the bottom of the carburetor through here. The other two vacuum ports come in through right there. And they're basically just pulling vacuum on the carburetor. Rather, the carburetor is pulling vacuum through, and it's a bleed for those. I'm going to go into some of that stuff in another video, but that just lets you know that those are two ports that should be checked and cleaned to make sure they're okay. All right, now I wanted to stop where I'm at right now and look at something here. If you'll notice, there is a lot of this brown stuff in the bottom of the bowl. This is going to be a real pain to get out of here. It's going to probably take me doing something like what I'm doing right now, where I'm scraping the bottom of it, essentially scraping the bottom of the bowl. All right, so basically I sprayed it down with some Berryman's Chem Tool B12, and this is supposed to be carburetor and choke throttle body cleaner. Anytime you're doing all of those things, sometimes I find that the product is not as good a solvent as it used to be. The EPA has eaten up a lot of our solvents to where they're not working like they should, and thus we have a problem. Problem with these Autolites is just that. The jets sit vertically inside of the bowl. The Holly jets are in the side of the metering block, so it doesn't tend to cause them to get obstruction in there as bad. These, everything goes to the bottom of the bowl, and when that happens, stuff can get down in there, and sitting up will cause the gas to sit in there. It'll cause a glazing and varnishing, which is probably what this stuff over here is, and it'll cause you issues with the carburetor not wanting to clean up. I can go in here with this thing and just brush away, and it does almost nothing. So that's going to be a challenge for me to get cleaned out. But I just want to stop real quick while I'm doing the rest of this cleaning and show you those things. When we get deeper into the port clearing on this, you'll see better what I'm talking about with how I use air and other tools to do this. But this is going to suck up a few minutes. All right, so I've gone to using a flat blade screwdriver with a small narrow blade on it. I've got one smaller than this. If I need it, I'll go get it. What I want to try to do is to get all this particulate out around all of these ports, because what will happen, especially if you start running ethanol fuels in these things, is this stuff will eventually loosen up and it will try to get down inside your jets or foul up your works otherwise. There's a little piece of it, I don't know if you can see it, right here, right off the tip of my screwdriver. That's the stuff that's going to be a problem for you down the road, because it will just sit in there and it'll loosen up and it'll start building up inside of the carburetor and get down inside your jets. It'll give you funky idle, it'll give you a funky driving when you're going down the road if that's floating around, because it may go down there and not go very far, get barfed back up into the bowl, and you're going to have a heck of a time finding out what's going on that's causing it. I think a lot of problems that guys see with these carburetors when they're reusing them and they're going in and rebuilding them is they don't clean up all the junk in the bowl, and it gets to be a problem for them later when it all starts to loosen up and go away. This is almost like being a dental assistant or a dental person, a dental hygienist, because you're using all these funky little tools to get inside of all these little crevices in here if the carburetor's been sitting up for a good while like this one has. So I'm going to continue on with my fun and games here. Now I'm moving to the next phase of this, which is using the Berrymans and things like that to get inside these port areas, and I'm going to use it to push fluid around with. Now what you have is your main jet ports are right here and here, and I'm just going through with a scraper and kind of cleaning this up a little bit inside of here of things that are going to be really hard to remove. I've still got some residual old fuel out here on the walls. I'm not going to probably be able to get rid of all of that. What I want to do with this is very unsettling and somewhat dangerous, I guess, if you don't value your eyes. It's not a problem. But see all that junk that's in the bottom of the port there that just came out through that hole? I can, with these things, I like to back flush them rather than front flush them. Front flushing is taking and going with the Berrymans in the direction that the fuel would normally fly. But you can see right there that we pulled a bunch of junk. Now I've also got another tool here. I'm going to pull the flashlight out so the cameras will get ready again. This is a brush that I modified, just an acid brush that I've modified to go down inside of the ports here for the boosters, because that's what the main jets are feeding. They feed these two boosters right here. And I'm just pushing this down to the bottom and spinning it, because there's loose particulate in the bottom that's just really hard for me to show you, but it's in there. And I run that around in there. I'll pull my flashlight back up, and I'm going to squirt some Berrymans in there. Now you can see there's quite a bit of particulate even down inside of the ports there, and that's going to need to be cleaned out, and I'll probably do that by putting this over into my bucket here and just spraying it out. So what I do is I take this with the Berrymans in there and go to the side that doesn't have any ports on it. On the Autolite carburetors, anything from about right here down, well actually about right there down, does not have any ports except for the fuel inlet port right here. So you can use that to send this down for clean out. Taking a look at it again. Okay, we've cleaned all that fuel out of there. All right, now I want to start going through with my guitar wire and checking ports to make sure ports are clear. I'm using the number 58 wire that I picked up at Guitar Center. And no, Guitar Center is not a sponsor. There is a port down on the bottom side here. This port actually goes out to this center post right here. This is where you get an accelerator pump shot when you accelerate the car, when the accelerator moves forward and pulls in, it pulls the pump, and the pump displaces fuel to the center spot, and that goes out through 2 ports on the booster assembly here. There's also another port on the inside of the carburetor that you're probably not going to be able to see, that's right down here in the very bottom. I'm going to try to get this to go in there. It's going to be hard for you guys to see what I'm doing. And I'm just doing this. Now this port actually goes into this assembly here on the accelerator pump, and you can't see it, but there's actually a way for it to send fuel out through there as well. And I'm just looking to see if I can see the wire, and I can. That's a pretty darn big hole. It looks really clean down in there, so I'm not going to worry too much about that anymore. I'm going to inspect a lot of these other ports. This one is one that I would probably use a little smaller wire on, just to send something down through there to make sure that the port is clear. This is a vacuum port in the carburetor. It goes down into the bottom, comes out through here into this big area here. You'll notice you've got areas for vacuum signal right here. That's pretty good. These two that are in here, those are also both vacuum related. They go out into the bottom side through these 2 ports here and here, and you'll notice there's also another set of openings for vacuum here as well. Normally I would do that with the 58, but I've already inspected those and I know they're in pretty good shape. Now we've got really small ports. There's one that's inside of here. That's also a port for your power, your accelerator pump. That one has got a very tiny port, and we use on it our number 11, because it is super tiny. The 11 is about the only thing that will go down in that port. We're just doing this to check. If you're going to bust a wire up, it's going to be this one. Well, this is one of them. Use my flashlight so I can see what I'm doing. Now that one just goes straight into the fuel bowl. I honestly don't quite know what that one is for, but we want to make sure that port is clear. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start working on the ports for idle, because there are a number of small ports that you can see around the perimeter. These are all idle related. There's one here on either side. There are 3 small ports as well that are up inside of here that you probably just can't see. Okay, good clean there. Good clean there. Usually if you're going to have a problem with these ports, it's going to be right at the actual exit of the port where the fuel is delivered for idle. You'll notice that if I close this off, there is a port here, right there at the bottom side of the screws. This is part of your idle mixture screw set. So in other words, when you're setting up your idle mixture screws, these 2 ports are controlling your idle. These ports are cleaning out pretty nice. I don't feel anything popping. I've had a couple of these where I've done them and I've actually knocked stuff out of the way. The reason I like using the guitar wire for this is because it's got a really good recovery rate. It will bend but not stay bent, unless you just really bend it. All right, those seem to be okay. Take my flashlight and I'm going to look the ports in here. Those seem to be fine on this side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw a little bit of fuel or a little bit of Berryman's down the hole. I'm going to shoot this at my camera guys if at all possible. Okay, that's where your fuel is coming out for your idle adjustment. Seems to be okay. I'm not positive, but the other ones may actually be air bleeds for idle too. You just want to make sure those ports are all clean. Aha, did you see that squirt come out? That tells you that it's going exactly what I just said. It's going to the idle adjustment circuit. If you're having idle problems, this is probably where they're at. Here's what I'm seeing. If you've got a carburetor and you see these brass plugs on the ends here, that's where they go in and they drill those holes. So this is probably all, like I said, I'm almost positive that's all part of the idle circuit in there. That all looks pretty darn good. I'm going to move on from here onto some other things. That's coming out of your idle circuit. This is your power valve, or your accelerator pump. And what I'm doing, again, is I'm back flushing. I'm going from wherever this stuff ends up to where it's going to be the most likely problem, which is down here in the low side of your circuit. Aha. You see here, right here? Something just popped up out of that circuit point. Never going to know up there, will we? Now we start going back in and doing our rebuild. All of this stuff will be cleaned up then. Basically, I just use a scraper, but if you leave it in gasoline long enough, it'll basically pick up just like I just did there. And then you can use like a steel wool to clean it off with. Even with the Berrymans, I should probably have gloves on, but I tend to not do that when I'm doing this delicate work because it's just hard to control the wires in a set of gloves. Always use a new steel wool when you're doing this too. And this is a stainless wool, not a steel wool. It's a bigger, broader thing, so you're less likely to put any kind of contaminant from this inside of your ports. All right, so that is your fuel point right here. It's pulling from probably somewhere in the bowls. Not exactly sure. And it may be going all the way out over to the circuit on the top side, and I'll show you that in just a second. I'm just running these through here to see if I can clean out the ports to make sure we got fuel flow. So how am I going to check that? Dollars to donuts, that's coming out of one of the two ports on the back side. These are small enough that I would be willing to go this way with them. And that's why I wear safety glasses right there. It burns! Those feed out directly to the booster points here and here. That's going to put a tremendous amount of fuel in whenever your power valve opens up at whatever vacuum it is. So if you've got a 7 power valve, it's opening up at 7 inches of vacuum. If you've got an 8, it's opening up at 8 inches of vacuum. The higher the number, the sooner it opens. But trust me, you don't want a 12 power valve because you're just dumping raw gas into the carburetor. Not going to be happy. You're going to have to play with it to get the one you want. But we do know Ford typically put an 8 or an 8.5 power valve in these 2100 Autolites. But the kits come with a 7. All right, so that's that. I'm going to move this aside for right now and dump this crap into our fuel crap. Wow, that's smelling funky. And I need to get me a set of gloves on because I'm not going to dip my hands down into that mess and goo. So here we go. I've got a somewhat plugged port on one side, and that's because I've been cleaning around inside of the booster. This is your annual discharge booster. This is, in my opinion, one of the best ways to go because of the way the booster is set up. The Holley booster is set up to where it just pushes fuel out on the back side over here, and it just kind of dribbles in. This is an annular discharge booster, almost like a fuel injection system-ish. And you have discharge ports that go all the way around this, and it pulls fuel in a more even way. It atomizes fuel a lot better, in my opinion, than some of the other carburetor systems out there. But that port is not wanting to clear up. I'm going to have to get in with some Berrymans. I'm going to pull this up here to shoot into, having learned my lesson. A lot of times I think why these carburetors, people poo-poo them is because they don't know how to do this kind of stuff. where they go in and they work the system, so to speak. You know, I just got some junk out of that port right there. It is a lot of tedious work, I will say that. This is not something you're going to do in 2 or 3 minutes out in the shop. You will be spending some time on this activity. I'm going to run my wire down through here, my 14 gauge. This port's actually bigger than that. But it feels like these are pretty clean. When you're pushing these wires through, you want to, if you feel an obstruction, you go slowly at first. And then you kind of push through. See the wires coming through. I'm also going to go in and run the Berrymans in there. There is actually a port out here as well, which is part of this that you see in here. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to get too much done with what's in there. It looks pretty clean overall though. Okay. So I'm going to take this and set it down here for now. We're running out of things to work on this. I'm going to open up the stink vat, see if there's anything else down in here I can grab. More parts. This is just, oh, there's my brush. I was wondering where that got to. This is just going to be a matter of cleanup. I'm not really hitting this real hard with the stuff here. What I want to do is when I'm cleaning this stuff up, what I'm trying to do is make it really decent so I can see if I've got a problem, because it'll just make it a lot easier to identify an issue on this if the parts are clean. On a Ford carburetor, you're not going to have anything but fuel coming out of the idle adjustment screws, or possibly out of the accelerator pump. Those are going to be your 2 biggest possible leak points. But next week we're going to be coming back with how to go in and set this bad boy up to go back on a car, so that in the coming weeks we can take that Galaxy engine and see if it runs as decent as I think it does. I'll be here all day playing with that. I ain't stick my hand down in the fishy wishy. If I'm lucky I won't get any gasoline on my fingers. Don't think I need that. This is our accelerator pump cover. This is going to require me to do some cleaning on it. When you put your accelerator pump on, make sure that you're putting it on, if you're putting it on before you do anything else, make sure that that hole right there is at the bottom. That's your weep hole for if your accelerator pump dies on you. It's a way for you to know, because it'll leak fuel out of there. All right, so one last little dunk in the pool. I'm going to set this aside, and we're going to close this bad boy out. All right, there you go. As you can see, we have a lovely vat of dirtiness here now. There's a lot of junk and dirt in that old fuel, and it's going to stay that way. I'll have to dispose of this gasoline. Probably what I'm going to do is I'll seal this thing up in the bucket and just reuse it for cleaning carburetors, because all this stuff will settle out in the bottom, and I can throw another carburetor in here to clean it up. Next week, we're going to be coming back with how to build that carburetor with the kit we got from the guys at National Parts Depot. And then after that, very soon, we will be going in and actually trying to get the Galaxy to start run so we can see if the transmission in it is still any good. So come back for that. All right, do me a favor, check us out on Patreon. Look, if we've done anything at all to help you in your build, or maybe we've just given you inspiration on a weekly basis, maybe consider doing some support over there. Anything from $1 all the way up to $1 million, we'll take it. I'm not proud. If you send $1 million in, as long as the check cashes, I'll be your biggest fan. Speaking of big fans, the guys who are going up next to me over here or over here, these are the folks who've already put their money where their mouth is on a very consistent basis. So we appreciate all of our guys that are throwing themselves up on the list over here or maybe over here. So that's one thing. Now what I want you to do is also go out and subscribe to the channel. We are looking for 100,000 subscribers by Christmas. Go talk to Cletus McFarland. Heck, Peter McKinnon. I don't care who you get the people from, just throw them in the bank for us. Because what we're trying to do is do this by Christmas. I've done this before. It didn't work then. Probably not going to work now. But if you guys will just go out and talk to these other channels and say, hey, we got a dude over here trying to get to 100,000 subscribers by Christmas. Our thought process is it's going to be February, which would be okay. That's my wife's birthday month. And yes, we have an entire month for that around here. Don't ask. Another thing you need to do is super thanks. Worst marketing idea ever from YouTube. I'm sorry, it just is. But on a super thanks, you can put some money toward us on, like if you just think, hey, this one video helped me out, a little bit of money down there in that corner, bada bing, bada boom, you put it in there, diddly diddly dee. I don't even know you sent it because it doesn't separate that out from the normal money that we make from all the ads and stuff that YouTube puts in the front of our videos that we have not necessarily asked them to put in our videos. Anyway, you guys do me a favor, be kind to each other, love on each other, treat each other nice. You have a great week. We'll see you next time on Autorestomod. Orange hands. Orange, you glad I'm wearing them? Because my hands would stink like gasoline, not oranges. See, I used orange again. Orange. Jazz hands. I don't know what jazz hands look like. Maybe this is jazz hands?